Our first presenter today is going to be Maureen Jobrack from Cupsaw Lake, and she's going to be talking about their Scout Camp program. So without me muddling on more, I'm going to introduce Maureen and turn the microphone over to her.
Okay. All right, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm very nervous, so I apologize in advance if I go too fast. I'll wait till the lights get turned off. Okay, so I'm Maureen Jobrack from Cupsaw Lake, and I'm going to be talking about the Lake Scouts program that we ran this summer. So I'm going to kind of go through where the idea came from, what the goal of the kind of Scout program was, who helped run it, what did we do, and then kind of where do we go from here? What is the pie in the sky dream of Lake Scouts? So the idea kind of came from the fact that I have a 5-year-old little girl who loves to tell me about what she learns at preschool or now kindergarten, and it got me thinking about the fact that kids like to tell their parents what they've learned, and sometimes they can do it in a little nagging way when their parents might do things that the kids have learned is not correct. For instance, when kids go through like the DARE program in high school and they learn like too much alcohol is bad, and then they see mommy and daddy drinking a lot of beer, they're like, hey, I learned that wasn't a good thing. So I thought if we taught the kids about lake health and what was good for the lake, what was not good for the lake, they would nag their parents into getting their septic systems pumped when they're supposed to, or maybe not using that fertilizer on the grass. This was the closest comic strip that I could find to kind of go with the goal here. So again, it was kind of getting kids to learn about the lake and then relaying that information to their parents, or if their parents kind of attended the Scout program as well, they'd learn things about the lake. So who helped? It was all members of the Cupsaw Lake Environmental Committee. So we had a high school science teacher. We got very lucky with her. She provided some of the equipment as well, and she led 2 sessions. We had participation with members of the garden club as well. So we got to use them. We had an environmental scientist on our committee. She was fantastic. And then we also had our very own goose whisperer. So if you attended one of the NJCOLA meetings earlier this year, that would be Tom. So what did we do? So we spent the summer learning about the basics of lake health. So we had 6 sessions. We partnered with the Beach Club program, which is like the summer program that kids attend at Cupsaw Lake. And so we partnered with Beach Club, and we offered this to kids ages 11 and up. We were able to expand it and include 8 and up for some of the sessions. I do think that the way the program was run, it was better for 8 and ups. Younger kids probably would not have gotten as much out of it. So 8 and ups was kind of where we focused. We had all of the sessions were led by volunteers. So again, members of the environmental committee, members of the garden club, it was all volunteer led. Our first session focused on the watershed, kids learning about the watershed, and we also did some basic measurements. We learned about groundwater, invasive species, living things in the lake, and then we did a tour, and we also had Lynn and Debbie, I think? Yes, Lynn and Debbie came and did the Enviroscape mini camp as well. So I'm going to kind of talk about each of the sessions that we did, what program we kind of ran with the sessions, and we'll kind of go through. All right, so the first one was understanding the watershed, and we had our environmental scientists print out a giant watershed map, and we blew it up so that the street names and house numbers were on it, and then the kids put little stickers on their houses, and so they could see on the watershed where they lived, if they were in the Cupsaw Lake watershed or if they weren't in the watershed. And then we talked about what did that mean. We talked about the fact that if they were washing their car in their driveway and they lived in the watershed, the water that flowed off their driveway into the storm drain wound up in our lake. If they didn't live in our watershed, it didn't come into our lake, but we live very close to the Wanacue Reservoir, so that water would flow to the reservoir. So this kind of helps the kids understand that just because they might not live lakefront doesn't mean that what they're doing in their property doesn't have an impact on our lake. And so that was a lot of fun. The kids loved putting stickers on their houses and seeing where their friends lived and who was in the red line, who wasn't in the red line. And then talking about the fact that Skylands Manor and Shepherd's Lake is all part of our watershed as well. And so when they go hiking up in the gardens, knowing that all of that flows to our lake was interesting for them to hear as well. So the next session that we did focused on measuring things in the lake. So we used a Secchi disc and taught the kids how to read that. That was really fun for the kids. We did it in different places around the kind of diving area of our lake. We did it in shade and sun to talk about the differences there. And the kids really enjoyed playing with that. Anything that was hands-on, the kids obviously enjoyed. And so we also took temperature, and it was very entertaining watching kids try to read the analog thermometer. I did not offer them a digital one. I think Tom might have, but so they did that. They did well. They read it. And then we also just used our eyes to look at the color of the lake and what the weather was like. That was a fun one because we made them walk around and take different measurements and kind of seeing at the different depths that we might take these measurements, what contributed to the different numbers that we would find. And we also realized some kids really did not have great eyesight, so that needed to be looked at. So then understanding the groundwater. So the next session was led by our science teacher, and she had phenomenal sessions, but she had the kids build an aquifer in a little cup. And so we took the rocks and sand and dirt from around Cupsaw Lake and then Cupsaw Lake water, and we poured it in to see kind of what would happen. So we did the little aquifer in a cup. You can see I have some pictures. I don't know how clear they're going to be. But the kids really enjoyed this. And what we did was we had two groups. So one group got no pollutants, and one group got Skittles drink powder as a pollutant. And so we showed how the groundwater could still be impacted by pollutants. So the color of the water would be bright lime green with the Skittles powder. And that showed that even though the ground can help clean the water, it doesn't remove all the pollutants. And so things that hit the ground can eventually wind up in your groundwater, which then could come into your lake. And so we talked about kind of what types of things wind up in the lake. The next session was led by the garden club, and they made these one of the girls on our committee and in the garden club made these handouts for the kids. But they did a scavenger hunt to look for invasive species. So this was specifically looking at invasive plant species. And so they had them hidden around one of the islands near our lake. And the kids went through to try and identify an invasive species, and then they talked about what are alternatives that could be planted instead. And this one would be important for kind of all the lakefront property owners, well, everybody in Cupsaw Lake to know about. And so this was good that the garden club kind of got involved and sent these flyers home with the kids so that they can give them to their parents and say, hey, we have this flower in our yard. It's actually not a good one. We should switch it with something else. And so that was a hit. The kids loved searching for the plants. The next session, we did kind of cheat on this one a little bit because we didn't use Cupsaw Lake water. We used pond water, but we got pond water to find small organisms that kids could look at with magnifying glasses and a microscope. So we got to see things like leeches, tadpoles, baby salamanders, fish eggs, snails. So the kids got to look at all of that. They got to practice trying to suck things up with a pipette and looking at them under a magnifying glass. And they had charts with characteristics of the different organisms that they were looking at so that they could try and identify what they were seeing. That one was probably one of the favorite activities. So the kids really enjoyed seeing the baby tadpole, or the tadpoles and the baby salamanders, and identifying what made those two different. So that was cool. And then we had an on-water tour. And so Tom led this on-water tour, and we went all around the lake to point out the various places where water flows in from the sub-watersheds that we had talked about on our first session, and so the kids got to see where the water came in. We talked about the different coves where water might be more stagnant and why that water quality looked a little different than in the middle of the lake. We got to see kind of some of the garbage collection points, if you will, where garbage kind of tends to collect at the end of the lake. One of the girls actually lived in the house right where that was, so she told us about how much garbage her dad pulls out regularly. So we talked about that so that they could see where it is, because a lot of times they kind of are by the beach or swim area. They don't necessarily take a boat ride all the way around the lake, and so it was interesting for the kids to kind of see all of the different pieces of our lake. And then our final session was a Jeopardy game. So we had a Cupsaw Jeopardy PowerPoint that was put together, and it had music and everything. It was really, really well done. And we had questions from all of the sessions that we led throughout the summer, and the kids divided themselves into groups, and they did divide it, boys and girls. I am happy to say that the girls demolished the boys. Really, they did quite well. But the kids really had a great time with that. They acted as buzzers themselves and jumped up when they knew the answer. And it was exciting to see how much information they retained over the course of the summer. Even if they didn't know the exact word or definition of something, they could kind of describe it, and you could tell that they remembered what we had said. They might not remember the exact term, but they knew what they were talking about. And they were excited, and they seemed to really enjoy it. So it was a great way to wrap up the 6 sessions by having this final Jeopardy one to see what they learned. Obviously, we gave them candy when they won, because we did have to kind of bribe them sometimes to attend because it was inside. So that was the final session. We also did a mini camp. As I mentioned, Lynn and Debbie came and they did the Enviroscape mini camp. We did this for younger kids. So we had a young group of like 7 and unders, and then we had an older group of 8 and up. And this was very well attended. For the younger kids group, we had some parents attend as well, and I had multiple parents come up to me afterwards saying that they learned a lot from it. So that was exciting to see. But the kids loved it. They loved the goose poop chocolate sprinkles. They loved making it rain with the spray bottles, and then seeing how dirty the water would be at the end of it. They showed like the salt for the fertilizer, all of the different things that they put on the Enviroscape, and then kind of how the rain and all the water impacts the lake at the end. And so this was a really great session to offer for the younger kids, but as well as kind of repeating some of the information that we had taught them throughout the sessions for the older kids as well. So this was a great session, and I had some parents actually ask if we could have you guys come back and do another camp at the library or even at the schools. And so this was a big hit. So if you haven't had them come out to your lake, I highly recommend having Lynn and Debbie come and do an Enviroscape for your lake. Parents and kids alike really enjoyed it. So how did it go? Overall, it went really well. We had about 30 kids total. So the most attended session had 18, and then we had kids kind of come and go throughout the summer. So we probably saw 30 kids total throughout the course of the summer, which is pretty good. Considering kind of how many kids were even available in that age group. We had decent attendance. We had a lot of parental interest. We did have parents attend some of the sessions. You could see them kind of in the background taking pictures, and they'd come up afterwards and say, hey, I didn't know that. And so that was always good to hear. We also had the health department come for one of the sessions, and that was pretty neat. So they stopped by and they kind of watched the mini camp, and then they talked about kind of expanding the program and bringing the mini camp back to the library or the schools and kind of doing stuff with that. So overall, it was a success. I really enjoyed it, and I think the kids enjoyed it, and I look forward to hosting it next summer. So speaking of next summer, what is next? So have big dreams. So the dream for this next summer would be to introduce Lake Scouts to the other two big lakes in Ringwood. So right now it's at Cupsaw Lake. I'd love for Erskine and Skyline Lakes to have their own kind of troops. And then at the end of the summer, we'd do a big Jeopardy tournament across the three lakes and prove that Cupsaw is the better lake. Of course. So that's what I would love to happen next summer. And then eventually what would be amazing is if we could work with the larger Scout organizations for the summer program to act as a badge that kids could earn when participating in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. And so we have one of our environmental committee members is part of the Boy Scouts of America, and so she leads different scout troops, and so I've been talking with her about kind of what merit badges Lake Scouts could help kids earn. And so if they could participate in Lake Scouts over the course of the summer and earn a badge, then that would kind of go towards Boy Scouts or go towards Girl Scouts. And that would be kind of the ultimate dream if this was across the country, something like that. But that's the dream. So I did want to kind of talk about some additional ideas that kind of Google helped me come up with that we would probably introduce next summer, because again, we only did 6 sessions this summer. We did 6 weeks. Sorry. And so we have lots of other kind of opportunities available. We did once a week for 6 weeks. So we could do more than once a week, or we could expand it to longer than just 6 weeks. So there's a lot that we can do. So some of the other ideas we had were, what's that muck? I thought about what the muck, but then if I misspoke, that might not be good. So this one would be looking at the lake bed and kind of understanding kind of what makes up a lake bed, because you've got kids that dig holes in their backyard and it fills with rainwater and then it goes away. So why does Cupsaw Lake not drain into the ground? What makes it different than the hole that I dig in my backyard? So teaching kids about why is that different? And then talking about, well, when I walk down the beach, it feels nice and soft, but then when I go up to the North Cove in Cupsaw Lake, it feels all squishy and I lost a shoe. Why does that happen? Kind of what is in that muck? What happens when the leaves fall into the lake? What happens to them? Do they decompose or do they sit there for a year? And so kind of that would be one of the sessions, is kind of walking into the lake, scooping out the muck and then looking at it and figuring out what's in it. How far down do we have to go before we hit a different texture, and what does that different texture indicate? Another one would be how many critters. I'm a math person, so I thought it would be really interesting to teach kids how to count by the quadrants, and looking along the shoreline, they could count and estimate how many critters are in a given area, whether that's bugs or kind of whatever we're looking at. And then another one would be, over the course of the summer, you could actually take mason jars filled with lake water. So at the beginning of the summer, they fill a mason jar with the lake water, and then they do different things to that lake water over the course of the summer in their mason jar or bowl, and see what happens, putting it in the sun, kind of a longer experiment over the course of the summer, so that they can really see in a small instance what is happening to their lake. And so you could even treat some of the mason jars and not others, and get an idea of what's happening. So I talked much faster than I did last night when I practiced this, so I'm actually at the questions part now. So if you've got any questions about what we did, or if you want me to go over any of the sessions again, I can talk through that. I went way faster. So yes, question.
What prompted all this?
I guess backstory, I am chair of the environmental committee at Cupsaw Lake. I was asked to, I volunteered myself to do it last kind of November timeframe, and then I started as chair of the committee in January, and my daughter was starting kindergarten in the fall, and I was trying to think about, like, how would I want her to learn about the lake? How would I have wanted to learn about lake life when I was a kid? And I did Girl Scouts as a kid, and so I was like, well, I don't want to do like a whole massive program, so I thought it'd be cool to get the kids interested in learning about the lake, and Beach Club didn't have a program, so I was like, let's start one.
And did the kids have to belong to the lake?
So the way that it worked for Cupsaw is we partnered with the Beach Club program. So Beach Club is something that you join as a kid, or your parents join you, and it's the activities. So like swim team, swim lessons, sports, games, arts and crafts. The Beach Club offers all of these programs, and for the first summer we partnered with Beach Club, so if any kid signed up for Beach Club, they could participate in Lake Scouts.
And
So
you are a mandatory lake?
no,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
yes, the fun hat.
So our lake is a lot smaller. Would you be able to email like how to get it started?
Yes, I have a document that I wrote up with the ideas of it that I'm happy to share.
Okay, so I'm the rec director, and that's a great program. I think it'd be great, and probably won't be as big, but
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Lynn?
Yes. Cupsaw was perfect for this because their beach area where it is all gated in. So the kids pretty much, it was interesting. They pretty much are on their own, and there would be an announcement for this camp or this thing, and they all went and knew what they were gonna do. The little kids, their parents came along with them, and any lake that has, let's say, an organized swim team, you might not have everything else that goes with it. But if you have volunteer parents, you could start small, and you can start to, work your way up. I was really very glad we went and saw the program.
We were happy to have you. It was great. Other questions? Yes, blue sweater.
Christine from Lake Stockholm. Excellent idea, thank you. Did you have difficulty getting volunteers to help you out?
Luckily, we did not. So I started meeting with I mentioned the idea to the environmental committee right away at the first meeting that we had in February, and I started asking folks if they had any interest in volunteering for it, and I had a sign-up sheet, and then I put together a meeting with all of the people who expressed interest in volunteering, and they came up with ideas. So the Aquifer building and where we looked at the organisms under the microscope, both of those ideas came from the high school science teacher. And then Corey, who is our environmental scientist, she told me that she could do a big map for the watershed. And so we had folks who volunteered kind of right from the get-go. I attended all but one of the sessions, and so I tried to make sure that I would be able to make all of the sessions so that there was kind of consistency there. And Alan came to all of them as well, and Tom helped, and he led a couple of the sessions. So we got very lucky that we had great volunteers from the get-go.
When did you have these sessions?
So these sessions were held on Thursday afternoons. So that was, honestly, scheduling was the hardest aspect of this, because we partnered with Beach Club. They had their predefined schedule, and they struggled this year with kind of setting up a schedule that worked with all the ages. And so when we first came up with the idea, it was going to be ages 8 and up. And we actually had to change the age requirement to 11 and up because of Beach Club scheduling. And then over the course of the summer, what wound up happening is if 8, 9, and 10-year-olds didn't attend sports or arts and crafts, they got to come to Lake Scouts instead. And so there was an overlap in scheduling, and so that was the hardest part of this. We also found that if the weather did not cooperate and Beach Club ended early, then the kids would go home and not stick around for Lake Scouts. And so scheduling was definitely the biggest challenge of Lake Scouts. And next summer, kind of one of the things that I will want to work on is ensuring that we have a set schedule that hopefully Beach Club can work around, rather than us trying to fit ourselves into Beach Club. Because the other thing is I'd like kids to participate in Lake Scouts even if they don't want to join the swim team or do swim lessons or spend 5 days a week at the lake with Beach Club. I'd like them to be able to participate just in Lake Scouts if that's something that they're interested in. We also had a lot of teenagers who expressed interest in volunteering. So we had a couple teenagers come and help volunteer with the sessions. And that was really good. I liked that we had the older kids because they're learning, but they're also getting their volunteer hours or things like that. And the timing of it was challenging with them as well. And so kind of having a set schedule at the beginning of the summer would have been a better kind of process for us. Yes.
Hi, Brenda with Lake Lenape. Thank you, by the way, this is really good. How can we reach you if we need to?
I did not put any contact information on this PowerPoint, but I will make sure that they have my information and my email and phone number and stuff. I think I gave you the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, I can post it on the website.
Okay, so we can post the PowerPoint on the website with my contact information, and I'll also post the Word document that has the outline of kind of materials and everything like that on it as well.
Yeah.
You had another question?
How long are the sessions?
An hour was the longest that we budgeted time-wise. I think the on-water tour was just about 50 minutes. That was probably the longest session. We were out there on the water. We didn't have a ton of attendees for the on-water tour, so I would say we were able to do it probably quicker than if we had had a lot of kids. And if we'd had a lot of kids and put them all into boats and kind of made them come with us, it probably would have been a little bit over an hour. But some of the sessions were as short as 30 minutes. And most were between that 40 and 45 mark. Other questions? Okay, well, we're ahead of schedule.